You know that feeling when your whole world crashes down in a single moment? When everything you've worked for, every sacrifice you've made, gets thrown back in your face by the one person you trusted most? That's exactly where my story begins. But here's the thing. This isn't just about betrayal. This is about what happens when you push a 62-year-old woman too far. Before we proceed with the story, if you love satisfying grandma revenge stories, hit subscribe button right now because we drop stories like this weekly and you're going to want notifications on. My name is Kathy Hayes, but everyone calls me Kathy. For 33 years, I lived in the same house on Sloane Street. That house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was where I raised my daughter Jennifer after my husband passed. It was where Jennifer took her first steps, where she learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where she cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. Every creaky floorboard, every paint chip, every garden stone, they all held memories worth more than gold. I'd spent the last decade of my working life as a school secretary, saving every penny I could, not for fancy vacations or designer clothes. I was saving for Jennifer's future, for her education, for her wedding. I gave her everything. And when she married Marlon, that smooth-talking financial advisor with the expensive cologne and even more expensive car, I welcomed him into our family with open arms. That was my first mistake. The warning signs were there from the beginning, but I ignored them. I didn't want to be that mother-in-law, the one who interferes and criticizes. When Marlon suggested Jennifer quit her teaching job because his salary was more than enough, I bit my tongue. When he started making comments about how my house was sitting on prime real estate, I brushed it off as innocent conversation. When Jennifer started visiting less and less, always with some excuse about Marlon's work schedule, I told myself they were just busy building their life together. I should have known better. I really should have. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March when everything changed. I remember because I'd just finished planting tulip bulbs in my front garden, the yellow ones that Jennifer loved as a child. My knees ached from kneeling, my hands were covered in soil, and I was thinking about making myself a cup of tea when Jennifer's car pulled into the driveway, but something was off. She didn't get out right away. She just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. When she finally emerged, her designer sunglasses couldn't hide the tension in her jaw or the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Mom, we need to talk," she said. Those 4 words. The same 4 words that have preceded every terrible conversation since the dawn of time. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with homework, where we'd shared countless meals, where I'd held her hand and promised everything would be okay when her father died. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jennifer pulled out a folder stuffed with papers. Her hands were shaking slightly as she pushed them across the table toward me. "Mom, Marlon and I have been doing a lot of financial planning, and we think it's time we talked about your living situation." My living situation. Like I was some kind of problem to be solved. She launched into this rehearsed speech about assisted living facilities, about how I was getting older, about how maintaining a house was becoming too much for me. Never mind that I'd just hauled bags of mulch from my car that morning. Never mind that I still walked 3 miles every day and could beat most people half my age in a game of cards. But then came the real punch. Marlon appeared in my doorway. I hadn't even heard him come in, with a real estate agent. An actual real estate agent, right there in my house, without my permission. "Mrs. Hayes," the agent said with that practiced, sympathetic smile they must teach in real estate school, "your daughter and son-in-law have found a wonderful assisted living community for you. The village at Sunset Hills has excellent reviews, and the best part is selling your house will more than cover the costs for several years. I felt like I was underwater, watching this scene play out from somewhere far away. Jennifer was talking about floor plans and meal services and how I'd make so many friends my own age. Marlon was pulling up property values on his phone, showing me numbers that made my head spin. The real estate agent was walking through my house, taking notes, pointing out original hardwood floors and charming built-ins, like she was already preparing the listing. "We've already put down a deposit at Sunset Hills," Jennifer said, and that's when I realized this wasn't a discussion. This was an ambush. "They have an opening next month, and Marlon found a buyer who's willing to pay cash. It's all working out perfectly." Perfectly. For whom? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become this person? Where was the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms? The teenager who swore she'd never become one of those people who cared about money? The young woman who cried in my arms when her father died and made me promise we'd always have each other? She was gone. In her place sat a stranger in expensive clothes, spouting buzzwords about liquidating assets and optimizing resources. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply stood up, walked to my front door, and opened it. "Get out," I said quietly. "All of you. Get out of my house." Jennifer's face crumpled. "Mom, you're not understanding." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "You want to sell my home, put me in a facility, and take the money. I understand exactly what's happening here. Now get out." Marlon tried to step forward, his phone still in his hand, that infuriating smooth smile still plastered on his face. "Mrs. Hayes, if you just look at the numbers—" "Out!" They left. Jennifer was crying. Marlon was muttering something about me being unreasonable. The real estate agent clutched her folder and scurried to her car like I might chase her with a broom. I closed the door, locked it, and for the first time in 50 years, I poured myself a stiff drink in the middle of the afternoon. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, in my house, staring at the ceiling and thinking. Jennifer had my power of attorney. She had my trust. She had access to my bank accounts because I'd added her years ago, thinking it would make things easier if I ever got sick. I'd basically handed her the keys to my life, and she'd decided to use them. But I wasn't some helpless old woman. I'd survived a husband's death, raised a daughter alone, navigated 33 years of property taxes and plumbing disasters and roof repairs. I'd faced down aggressive parents at parent-teacher conferences and balanced budgets that had no business balancing. If Jennifer and Marlon thought they could steamroll me, they had severely underestimated who they were dealing with. The question was, what could I do? I spent the next week in a haze of anger and heartbreak. Jennifer called 17 times. She sent texts. She showed up at my door, but I didn't answer. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out my next move. Because make no mistake, I was going to make a move. That's when I remembered Hank. Hank Morrison was a lawyer I'd met years ago at a community fundraiser. He'd recently retired and had mentioned he took on the occasional case for entertainment. We'd become friends of sorts, chatting at the grocery store, comparing notes on our gardens. He was sharp, clever, and most importantly, he despised people who took advantage of the elderly. I called him, "Hank, I need your help, and I need you to be ruthless." We met at a coffee shop across town where I knew Jennifer wouldn't find us. I laid out everything: the ambush, the real estate agent, the power of attorney, the deposit at Sunset Hills. Hank listened, taking notes, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and laughed. Actually laughed. Kathy, do you know what they tried to do is actually illegal in several ways? You're competent, you're not a danger to yourself, and they attempted to coerce you into selling your property. Plus, putting down a deposit without your consent, using your power of attorney to do it. That's financial abuse. Financial abuse? The words hung in the air between us. Here's what we're going to do, Hank said, pulling out his phone. First, we're revoking that power of attorney immediately. Then we're filing a report with Adult Protective Services. Third, we're going to have a very interesting conversation with Marlon about his financial planning and see if it holds up to legal scrutiny. Over the next 2 weeks, Hank worked magic. The power of attorney was revoked. Adult Protective Services launched an investigation. But the real beauty of Hank's plan didn't reveal itself until he dug into Marlon's background. Turns out, Marlon, the financial advisor, had been doing some creative accounting with his client's money. Nothing illegal enough to get arrested, not yet, but enough to catch the attention of his firm's ethics board once Hank made some strategic phone calls. Marlon was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Without Marlon's income, Jennifer couldn't afford their lifestyle. The house they'd bought in that fancy subdivision with the 3-car garage and the pool, the mortgage was crippling. The car leases, the country club membership, the designer clothes, all of it came crashing down like a house of cards. But I wasn't finished, not even close. See, I'd been thinking about that deposit they'd put down at Sunset Hills using my power of attorney. According to Hank, that was my money they'd used. So I sued them to get it back, along with damages for emotional distress and attempted financial exploitation. Jennifer called me sobbing. Mom, please, we're going to lose everything. Marlon might lose his license. We can't afford the lawyer fees. You were willing to take everything from me, I said calmly. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? But you're my mother. Exactly. I'm your mother. And you treated me like I was a burden to be disposed of. You didn't even have the decency to talk to me like an adult. You ambushed me in my own home with a real estate agent. Marlon said it was the best way. Marlon, I interrupted, is a liar and a thief who saw my house as a piggy bank, and you let him turn you into someone I don't even recognize. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her crying, but I didn't soften. Not yet. The lawsuit went to mediation. Jennifer and Marlon couldn't afford to fight it in court, not with Marlon's job in jeopardy and their savings drained. They agreed to pay back the deposit plus damages, a sum that ended up being close to $50,000 once everything was calculated. But money was never really the point. They lost their house. Marlon lost his job. They moved into a small apartment on the opposite side of town. Jennifer had to go back to teaching, back to the job she'd loved before Marlon convinced her to quit. And me? I stayed in my house on Sloane Street. I planted my garden. I walked my 3 miles every day. I played cards with friends. I lived my life exactly as I had been, but with one crucial difference. I'd learned to protect myself. 6 months after the mediation, Jennifer showed up at my door. She looked different. Tired, yes. Humbled, definitely. But more like the daughter I remembered. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She reminded me of the girl who used to help me in the garden, who'd get dirt under her fingernails and laugh about it. Mom, she said quietly, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that Marlon and I are separating. And I'm so sorry. I let him poison me against you. I let him convince me that your house was ours to deal with. I forgot that you're not just my mother. You're a person with your own life, your own choices, your own dignity. I forgot everything you taught me, and I'm so ashamed." I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to let her suffer the way she'd made me suffer. But I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. More than that, I saw my daughter again, the one who'd been hiding under layers of Marlon's manipulation and materialism. "Come in," I said. "We'll have tea." We sat at that kitchen table again, but this time it was different. Jennifer didn't have a folder of papers. She didn't have rehearsed speeches about assisted living. She just had tears and apologies and a willingness to listen. "I've been in therapy," she told me, trying to figure out how I became that person. "The therapist says Marlon was emotionally abusive, that he isolated me from you, that he made me dependent on his view of the world. It's not an excuse, but it's helping me understand." We talked for hours about her marriage, about the warning signs she'd ignored, about how Marlon had gradually convinced her that material success was more important than relationships, about how he'd framed taking my house as helping me rather than what it really was, theft dressed up in concern. "He made me believe you couldn't take care of yourself," Jennifer said, wiping her eyes. "He'd point out every time you mentioned being tired or your knees hurting, and he'd build this narrative that you were declining. But you weren't. You were just being a normal person who occasionally gets tired or has aches and pains." He twisted everything. I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm not going to lie and say everything's okay, because it's not. You hurt me deeply, Jennifer. You betrayed my trust in ways I'm still processing. But I see you trying to make amends. I see you taking responsibility. That means something. Can you ever forgive me?" she asked. "Eventually," I said. "But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. You're going to have to earn back my trust, and that's going to take time." She nodded. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes." And she did. Over the following months, Jennifer showed up. Not to ask for anything, not to make excuses, but to rebuild what she'd broken. She came over on weekends to help in the garden. She invited me to her new apartment for dinner, humble meals cooked in a tiny kitchen, nothing like the catered affairs she used to host in her McMansion. She introduced me to her therapist, who helped mediate some of our conversations. Slowly, painfully, we began to heal. The divorce was finalized a year after the mediation. Marlon fought it, of course, but Jennifer had documentation of his financial misconduct and his manipulation. He tried to get alimony, which would have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic. He got nothing. As for me, I made some changes too. I updated my will, making sure everything was ironclad. I set up a trust that couldn't be touched by anyone but me until my death, at which point it would go to Jennifer with strict conditions. She had to prove she'd maintained stable employment for at least 2 years and attended financial literacy classes. I wasn't about to let another Marlon get his hands on what I'd worked for. I also started volunteering at a local senior center, sharing my story with other elderly folks who might be vulnerable to similar schemes. You'd be amazed how many people have children or relatives who try to take advantage of them. It's an epidemic nobody talks about. But I talked about it, loudly. I even did a segment for the local news about elder financial abuse, and I didn't hold back. The reporter asked me what I'd say to others in similar situations, and I looked right into that camera and said, "Don't let anyone make you feel like you're a burden. Don't let anyone convince you that you're incapable of making your own decisions. And if someone comes after what's yours, fight back with everything you have. You're not helpless just because you're older. You're experienced, and experience is power." The segment went viral locally. I got letters from people across the state, thanking me for speaking up, sharing their own stories. Some of them broke my heart. Others made me angry all over again. But all of them reinforced what I'd learned. Elder abuse happens everywhere, to people of all backgrounds, and the perpetrators often wear friendly faces. 2 years after that terrible Tuesday in March, Jennifer and I were back in my kitchen, but this time we were making cookies, my mother's recipe that I'd taught her when she was little. She'd forgotten some of the steps, and we laughed as I guided her through them again. "Remember when you tried to add twice the sugar because you thought it would make them even better?" I asked. "And they came out so sweet we couldn't eat them," Jennifer laughed. "Dad tried one and said they were suitable for sealing envelopes." We laughed together, and for a moment it felt like old times. Not exactly the same. We'd both been changed by what happened, marked by it. But we'd survived. "Mom," Jennifer said as we waited for the cookies to bake, "I need to tell you something." My heart clenched. Not again. Please, not again. "I've been offered a teaching position at a school in California," she continued. "It's a great opportunity, but it means I'd be moving across the country, and I need to know. Is that okay with you? I don't want you to think I'm running away again." I took a breath, considering. The old me, the pre-betrayal me, would have had an immediate emotional reaction. But I'd learned to pause, to think, to trust my instincts. "Is this what you want?" I asked. "It is. It's a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my career. But not if it costs me you. I've already lost too much." I studied her face. She was being genuine. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she waited without trying to convince me, without manipulating or pressuring. "Then you should go," I said. "We have phones. We have video calls. And California has airports, last I checked. We'll figure it out." She hugged me, and I let her. "Thank you for giving me another chance," she whispered. "I know I didn't deserve it." "Maybe not," I agreed. "But I decided to give it to you anyway. That's what love is sometimes, choosing to give grace even when it's not deserved. But understand this, Jennifer. There are no more chances after this. If you ever try to take advantage of me again, if you ever try to make decisions about my life without my consent, we're done. Permanently. Do you understand?" "I understand," she said, "and I promise, never again." She moved to California 3 months later. We talk every week. She visits twice a year, always staying in a hotel because she wants to respect my space, always asking permission before coming over. She sends photos of her new life, her new friends, her new classroom. She's teaching again, doing what she loved before Marlon convinced her to give it up. And me? I'm still here in my house on Sloane Street. I'm 64 now, still walking my 3 miles, still tending my garden, still playing cards with friends who've heard my story and cheered my victory. I'm still fierce, still independent, still refusing to be anyone's victim. My house isn't just walls and a roof anymore. It's my fortress, my trophy, my reminder that I fought for what was mine and won. Every time I walk through that door, every time I sit in my garden, every time I make tea in my kitchen, I remember what I almost lost and what I refused to give up. Some people might think my revenge was cruel. They might say I should have been more understanding, that I destroyed my daughter's marriage and her financial security. But here's what those people don't understand. I didn't destroy anything. Jennifer and Marlon did that all by themselves. I just refused to be their victim. I set boundaries. I demanded respect. I used the law to protect myself from people who wanted to exploit me. And yes, there were consequences for their actions, serious consequences. But consequences aren't revenge. their accountability. The real revenge? It's me, living my life exactly as I choose, in my house, on my terms. It's knowing that I stood up for myself when it mattered most. It's the relationship I'm slowly rebuilding with my daughter, one based on mutual respect, instead of her assumption that she could control me. It's knowing that when they tried to take everything from me, I took my power back. That's the real story here. Not that I'm a vindictive old woman who destroyed her daughter's life, but that I'm a woman who refused to be diminished, dismissed, or disposed of just because I've got some years on me. And you know what? I'd do it all again. Because here's the truth they don't tell you about getting older. You don't become less of a person. You don't become less deserving of dignity and autonomy and respect. If anything, you become more experienced, more certain of what matters, more willing to fight for what's right. So if you're reading this and you're young, remember, your elderly parents and grandparents aren't problems to be solved or burdens to be managed. They're people who've lived full lives, who've earned their independence, who deserve to be treated with honor. And if you're reading this and you're older, maybe facing pressure from family members who want to make decisions for you, fight back. Get a lawyer. Document everything. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're being difficult for wanting to maintain control of your own life. You're not difficult. You're dignified. As for Jennifer and me, we're okay. Not perfect, but okay. She's learned that love doesn't mean ownership, and I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. We're both different people than we were on that terrible Tuesday in March. And my house? My beautiful, stubborn, resilient house on Sloane Street? It's still mine. The tulips still bloom every spring, yellow ones, Jennifer's favorite. The floorboards still creak. The memories still live in every corner. But now there are new memories too. Memories of fighting back. Memories of refusing to give up. Memories of proving that this grandmother had some epic revenge still left in her, just not the kind of revenge they expected. Do you think Kathy handled this the right way? What would you have done if your daughter did this to you? Let's have your comments, please.